Inside the tower, a woman sat in silence, her face lit by the flickering glow of candles. Her name was Caret, and she was feared by all who had heard of her. Caret was not an ordinary woman. She was a prophetess who could see the future and change it to fit her will. Her visions were always clear and true, but they came from a terrible power. Long ago, she had found an ancient relic, a jagged shard of black stone called the Shard of Night. It whispered to her, offering her strength beyond imagination if she would serve its darkness. She agreed, and from that moment, her life changed forever. Once, she had been ignored, dismissed as a wandering oracle with no followers. Now, she ruled over a land of ruin, her word law and her name a curse. But her heart, cold as it was, hungered for more. The darkness demanded it, and so she obeyed. Tonight, Caret knelt before a wide, shallow pool in her tower's highest chamber. The liquid inside the pool was not water, it was dark and oily, shifting like something alive. She reached out her pale hand, touching its surface, and the liquid rippled under her touch. Slowly, an image appeared, a boy standing on the edge of a forest, his green eyes bright with life. Her lips curved into a cruel smile. "He will be the one," she said softly. She waved her hand, and the liquid froze solid, locking the image in place. Rising from her kneeling position, she turned to her servants who waited silently at the edge of the chamber. "Bring me the boy," she commanded. The servants nodded without a word. They were her devoted followers, dressed in ragged robes and bearing marks of their loyalty on their scarred faces and hands. They would do anything for her because they feared her more than death itself. As the servants left to carry out her order, Caret turned to a man chained to the wall of her chamber. He was a knight who had tried to stop her from taking control of a nearby village. His armor was gone, his face bloodied, but his eyes still burned with defiance. "You think you can destroy everything, but you won't win," he said, his voice weak but firm. Caret tilted her head, amused. "I don't need to win. I only need to endure. And you won't." With a small gesture, she summoned a tendril of black smoke that curled through the air and wrapped around the knight's throat. He gasped, his body jerking as the darkness entered him. In moments, his body went still, his spirit consumed by the same force that fueled Caret's power. She watched as his lifeless body slumped to the floor, then turned away without a second thought. Hours later, the servants returned, dragging the boy behind them. He was young, maybe 10 years old, his face pale with fear. He struggled and cried out, but the servants held him tight. Caret stepped forward, her long crimson robes brushing the floor. She knelt so she was at eye level with the boy. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked, her voice soft but chilling. The boy shook his head, tears streaming down his face. He was too frightened to speak. "You are special," Caret said, her hand resting on his cheek. "You will help me create something great." The boy tried to pull away, but her grip tightened. Rising to her feet, Caret raised her arms and began to chant in a language no living person could understand. The air grew cold, and the shadows in the room stretched and writhed like living creatures. The boy's cries grew louder as the darkness surrounded him. The shadows twisted around his body, swallowing him whole. When the chanting stopped and the shadows retreated, the boy was gone. In his place stood a creature made of darkness. Its eyes glowed green, the only sign of the child it had once been. The creature knelt before Caret, waiting for her command. "You will destroy the last sanctuary of light," she told it. "Go, and leave nothing behind." The creature vanished into the storm outside. Caret stood alone in her chamber, her expression calm but her mind restless. She looked at the pool of black liquid again, already thinking about her next vision. The shard of night demanded more sacrifices, and she would not stop until its hunger and her own was satisfied. Caret knew what she was doing was evil, but she no longer cared. The world had ignored her once, treated her like she was nothing. Now, she had the power to make them all kneel before her. She would remake the world in her image, no matter how much suffering it cost. The storm outside grew stronger, echoing the chaos in her soul. The creature of darkness moved swiftly across the land, unseen by any but the shadows it commanded. It had no memories of being a boy, no thoughts of fear or love. It existed only to serve Caret's will. Somewhere far away, the last sanctuary of light stood as a flickering hope for those who had survived the prophetess's reign. Soon, it would burn. Back in her tower, Caret watched the creature's progress through her pool of black liquid. The Boyton monster traveled under the cover of night, leaving no trace of its path. She smiled, satisfied. The shard of night hummed softly, glowing faintly where it rested on a pedestal beside her. It fed on destruction, and she could feel its power growing. But Caret's hunger for domination was far from satisfied. The sanctuary would fall, yes, but it was only one piece of her plan. The shard whispered to her in the moments of silence, revealing glimpses of the future. It promised her a kingdom, a world that bowed before her. Yet, the whispers also warned of resistance, a force she had not yet crushed. She would not wait for them to find her. Caret would strike first. Days later, Caret stood in the heart of her ruined throne room. Her servants knelt before her in rows, their heads bowed low. They waited for her orders, their loyalty absolute. These were not ordinary people, each had sworn their soul to her, giving up their humanity in exchange for power. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and their hands trembled with eagerness to serve. "It is time to raise an army," Caret declared, her voice echoing through the room. "The sanctuary will fall, but there are more enemies. They hide in the shadows, hoping I will not notice them. We will show them their mistake." The servants murmured their agreement. "The dead will rise for me," she continued. "They will join us." Their souls will serve a purpose greater than they ever knew in life. And you, she pointed at a group of our strongest followers, will lead them. The chosen servants stood, their faces grim but determined. They knew the price of leading Caret's armies. Few survived such roles for long, but those who did earned her favor, a reward worth any risk. Caret moved to the center of the room, her crimson robes trailing behind her. She raised her hands and began to chant. The air grew heavy, and a deep, unnatural cold spread across the room. The floor cracked open in a dozen places, and from the fissures emerged skeletal hands, clawing their way to the surface. One by one, the dead rose. They were not the rotting corpses of old tales. These were husks animated by pure darkness, their eyes glowing with the same eerie light as Caret's. They carried weapons, swords, axes, and shields taken from the graves of forgotten warriors. When the last of the dead stood in formation, Caret lowered her hands and addressed them. "You belong to me now," she said, her voice cold and sharp. "You will destroy anything that stands in my way. Your loyalty will not falter, for you have no will but mine." The undead remained silent, their empty gazes fixed on her. She felt their obedience like a weight in the air, and it pleased her. As her army grew, whispers of Caret's actions spread across the land. Survivors fled from her territories, seeking refuge in the sanctuary and in the hidden villages that dotted the wilderness. In one such village, a small group of rebels gathered in secret. They were led by a woman named Lyra, a former priestess who had narrowly escaped one of Caret's earlier conquests. Lyra had seen the destruction firsthand, and she knew that the prophetess would not stop until everything was under her control. "We can't keep running," Lyra said to the group, her voice steady but urgent. "The sanctuary won't last much longer, and once it falls, there will be no safe place left. We have to fight." A young man, armed with a rusted sword, frowned. "How? She's too powerful. You've seen what she can do. We can't win against her." Lyra met his gaze. "Not alone. But there are others who still resist. We have to find them. If we unite, we might have a chance. And if we don't," another asked. Lyra's expression darkened. "Then the world will belong to her, and there will be nothing left for us." The group murmured their agreement, though fear lingered in their eyes. They had heard the stories of Caret's powers, of the creatures she controlled and the horrors she unleashed. But desperation had given them no choice. Back in her tower, Caret prepared for the next phase of her conquest. She stood before the shard of night, its whispers filling her mind. "You must find the others," it told her. "Those who would challenge you. They hide, but you are stronger. Crush them before they can gather their strength." "I will," she replied aloud. "They cannot stop me." The shard glowed brighter, its dark energy pulsing through the room. Caret felt its power coursing through her veins, filling her with renewed confidence. The army she had raised was only the beginning. Soon, the entire land would be hers. The rebels, the sanctuary, and anyone who dared oppose her would be nothing but ashes. Caret looked out the window of her tower, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The storm had passed, leaving the skies clear. But she knew it would return, stronger than before, and this time, it would be her storm. And no one would escape it. The creature of darkness arrived at the edge of the sanctuary under the cover of night. The sanctuary stood as the last haven of light and hope in a world consumed by Caret's darkness. Its towering white walls gleamed faintly even under the moonless sky, a stark contrast to the desolation beyond. But the creature did not see beauty, nor did it feel fear. It was only a weapon, created to destroy. Inside the sanctuary, the people huddled together in fear. They had heard rumors of Caret's growing power, of the dead rising to serve her, and of the boy who had become a monster. Many had fled from villages she had conquered, carrying tales of horror. They knew it was only a matter of time before the sanctuary became her next target. At the gates, guards stood watch, their eyes scanning the darkness beyond. One of them thought he saw movement, a shadow shifting unnaturally in the distance. He squinted, gripping his spear tightly. "Did you see that?" he whispered to the guard beside him. "See what?" the other replied. Before he could answer, the shadow lunged forward. The creature of darkness moved with inhuman speed, leaping onto the wall in a single bound. The guards barely had time to scream before it tore through them. Blood splattered across the pristine stone as alarms began to sound. The sanctuary erupted into chaos. Bells rang out, and people scrambled for safety as the creature wreaked havoc, cutting through defenses with brutal efficiency. Its claws, formed of shadow, pierced armor as though it were paper. The guards fought bravely, but their weapons barely slowed it down. Lyra and her small band of rebels had arrived at the sanctuary only hours earlier, hoping to find allies. They had not expected an attack so soon. "This isn't just an attack," Lyra said as she watched the chaos from a tower window. "This is her monster. She sent it here to break us. We have to stop it," one of her companions shouted. Lyra nodded. "We do, but not recklessly. This creature is powerful. We'll need a plan." She looked around the room, her mind racing. Then her eyes fell on an ancient tome resting on a nearby table. It was a book of old magic, one of the few relics the sanctuary's priests had preserved. She flipped through its pages quickly, searching for anything that could help. "There's a binding spell here," she said, pointing to a page. "It won't destroy the creature, but it might hold it long enough for us to regroup." One of the younger rebels hesitated. "That's risky. If the spell fails, it's already killing everyone outside," Lyra snapped. "We don't have time for doubt. Help me gather what I need." Outside, the creature had reached the sanctuary's inner courtyard. The last line of defenders stood between it and the civilians trying to flee into the central cathedral. Despite their terror, they fought bravely, their weapons glowing faintly with enchantments. The creature hesitated for the first time. It could feel the magic in their weapons, a faint flicker of the light it had been sent to destroy. But hesitation was not enough to stop it. With a guttural growl, it charged forward, swiping its claws and breaking through their ranks. Lyra and her group arrived just as the defenders fell. She carried a small vial of shimmering liquid and a piece of chalk. The others followed her closely, weapons at the ready. "There it is," one of them whispered, pointing at the creature. Lyra didn't waste time. She knelt on the ground and began drawing a circle around her group, the chalk glowing faintly as she walked. The creature turned toward them, its glowing green eyes locking onto hers. "Hurry," someone urged, their voice trembling. As the creature lunged toward them, Lyra threw the vial of shimmering liquid into the circle. The lines she had drawn fled with light, creating a barrier that stopped the creature mid-attack. It thrashed against the invisible wall, snarling and clawing, but it couldn't break through. Lyra began chanting the binding spell, her voice steady despite the fear pounding in her chest. The circle of light began to shrink, forcing the creature to the center. It howled in frustration, its form flickering as the magic took hold. Just as the spell was about to complete, the creature did something unexpected. It spoke. "You can't stop her," it said in a voice that was both human and inhuman. "She will find you, and when she does, you'll beg for death." Lyra's concentration faltered for a moment, but she pushed through, finishing the spell. The creature froze, its body dissolving into black mist that was trapped within the glowing circle. Far away in her tower, Caret felt the binding spell take hold. She slammed her hand onto the table in anger, the shard of night pulsing wildly beside her. "They are more resourceful than I thought," she muttered. "No matter. This is only the beginning." She turned to her growing army of undead, her crimson eyes gleaming with fury. "March on the sanctuary," she commanded. "Show them the cost of defying me." The dead obeyed, their movements synchronized as they began their relentless march. Caret watched them go, already thinking of the devastation they would bring. At the sanctuary, Lyra collapsed to her knees, exhausted but relieved. "We stopped it," one of her companions said, helping her to her feet. "For now," Lyra replied grimly. But this was just one of her weapons. The real fight is still coming. She looked toward the horizon, where dark clouds were beginning to gather once again. "We need to prepare," she said. "Because when she comes, we'll either stand together or fall alone." The group nodded, determination replacing their fear. The battle against Caret was far from over, but for the first time, they believed they had a chance. And they would fight to the very end.